4126, Proctor Hale called, and the boy ahead of me stepped through the iron door like he was going to bed. The door shut behind him with the soft, fat thunk of a vault seating home, and that sound peeled my eyes open mid-stride. Stone floor under sandals. A line of children in gray shifts, shoulder to shoulder, snaking down a corridor lit by oil sconces. My right wrist throbbed. I looked down and saw 4 digits burnt into the skin above the vein. 4127. Fresh, pink at the edges, black at the cuts. I didn't know this hand. The knuckles were narrow, the hairs were wrong, and I was inside a body that wasn't mine, and my last memory was Block G, the hermetic door at the south observation slot dropping 0.4 of a second before its norm, the rubber gasket hissing, then the dumb wet feeling of ribs going where ribs do not go. Then this, a corridor, a line, a brand. 4127, Hale said, and his eyes found me. He stood under the arch with a slate in one hand and a stylus in the other, a thin man in a slate blue robe with 2 silver bars on the cuff. He tapped my line on the slate without looking down. The boy behind me put a palm against my back. Not unkind, just moving the queue along, the way you move livestock. I didn't move. Hale lifted his chin a 1/4 inch. Step up, child. The verse does not wait. The arch behind him held the door. I saw it now. Iron sheeted in copper, a flange of cold-rolled bronze around the jamb, hinges set inside the wall so no one could pry them. Above the lintel, painted red and gold, a circle of script wound 3 times around itself. The holy ward they sing about, the thing nobody crosses without permission. I'd drawn that door. Not that one, its cousin. 8 times in 8 projects. The flange was wrong by a finger. The hinge pockets sat 0.5 centimeter too low, which meant the door wanted to settle, and settling doors are the doors that close early. 4127, Hale said again, and the stylus scratched once on the slate. I will mark you absent, and you will be carried. A second tap at my back. The boy behind me whispered, please. I made my feet move. 1 step, 2. The corridor narrowed toward the arch, and the air thickened the way air thickens when a room is sealed and the gasket is good. I caught the smell. Hot copper, scorched lamp oil, the whetstone breath of a closed cell, and my throat shut around it. I stopped under the arch with my hand on the bronze. Hale's stylus paused. I looked up at the ward, and the painted spiral slid sideways in my head and became something I knew. Not magic. A drawing. 3 loops, each one a load path. Top loop carrying the pressure, middle loop tying that pressure into the door frame, bottom loop sinking it into the floor slab. Standard distribution. The kind of layout I'd signed off on 1,000 times under 1,000 colder lamps. There was a gap. There is always a gap. Where the bottom loop met the slab, the painter had thinned the gold to keep the line clean across the seam. A hair-wide thinning. In a drawing, you'd circle it in red and write, service, a maintenance route. Some priest 200 years ago had needed to get behind this ward to repaint it, and he'd left himself a way in, and the way in was still there. My mouth was very dry. Child, said Hale. I dropped my hand from the bronze. The door in front of me sat in its frame the way Block G's door had sat in mine, patient and heavy, and 0.5 second early on its norm. How long? I said. My voice came out a boy's voice and I did not know it. Hale's stylus moved. Until what? Until the verse. He smiled the small, professional smile of a man reading a schedule. 9 days, 4127. Now step inside. A brass key clacked in the corridor lock, and the lamp outside our door died on the same breath. The dorm went black except for a thumbnail of orange under the jamb. 8 bunks, 4 to a wall, stone floor cold under my soles. The ceiling chamber had taken an hour and given me back a wrist that still buzzed and a head that ached behind the eyes. They'd marched a dozen of us up 2 flights and pushed us through a low oak door, and a proctor I hadn't seen before said 1 word, sleep, and turned the key. I lay on the straw and listened. Above me, the boy in the top bunk breathed too fast to be asleep. He was small, sandy hair, ink on his fingers. I'd watched him sign his number on the intake roll with his left hand, then glance around to check if anyone had noticed. Nobody had. I had.
"Don't stare at the door," he whispered.
I didn't turn my head.
"Why?" "Hinges here."
That sat between us a moment. Then I rolled onto my side, slow so the straw wouldn't crackle, and looked at the door from under my lashes. The ward was painted there too, smaller than the chambers. A single loop of red script around the keyhole, a comma of gold at the threshold, a thin black tick where the bolt seated. The kind of seal a tired man paints quickly at the end of a long shift. I read it the way I'd read 1,000 vent stacks. Top of the loop was intake, the priest's word for the pressure feed, the bit that pulls mana out of the air the way a duct pulls heat off a kitchen. Right side was the run, bottom was the exhaust. The keyhole sat where the exhaust met the floor seam, and the painter had gone thin again because he'd needed his hand steady to keep the line clean across the iron. A gap a hair wide, a maintenance bleed. Same hand, same century, same small lazy kindness left for the next priest with a brush. Down the corridor, voices. I stopped breathing. The boy above me stopped too. 41-27 on the slate, a man said. Hail. I knew that dry, schedule-keeping mouth. Vane wants the count clean by sundown. A second voice, older, graveled. 4,000 and how many? 127. Up from last year. They opened the western intake. A pause, the scratch of a stylus on slate. 9 days to the verse, Hale said. Make sure the defectives are bunked with informers. I want the strange ones flagged before the 3rd day. Footsteps moved off. The thumbnail of orange under the door dimmed as one of them passed close, then brightened again. I let the breath out through my teeth. 4,127. A number on my wrist, and 4,126 others stacked in bunks like this one, waiting 9 sunrises for a man with a brush to bleed them into a battery. My hand had made a fist in the straw. I opened it, finger by finger. You heard? The boy whispered. I heard. He was quiet a while. The hinges did not hear us. They checked the bunks before dawn, he murmured down through the slats. If you flinch when the prefect lifts your blanket, that's a demerit. 3 and you're called strange. What happens to strange? A long pause. The straw above me shifted. You go to Vane's office, he said. You come back wrong, or you don't come back. I tucked the painter's gap into the back of my head, behind the eyes, where I used to file the cousins of doors like this one. 9 days. 1 bleed in the bottom loop. A boy on the top bunk who knew the rules of a building I had just walked into. Somewhere below the floor, a bell, 1 slow iron note, rang an hour I did not know yet. I counted the seconds to the next stroke and reached 40 before the corridor lamp flared back up under our door, brighter, and a key began to turn in our lock. Blankets off your chests, hands flat. The voice came through before the door fully opened. 2 boys stepped into our dorm carrying a tin lamp between them, gray sashes across their shirts. The taller one, maybe 16, jaw like a shovel, held the lamp high so the light slid across all 8 bunks at once. Eyes on the ceiling, he said. Don't track me. I put my eyes on the ceiling. Above me, the straw shifted as the sandy-haired boy did the same, slow as syrup so nothing creaked. The smaller prefect, narrower, sharper, an ink spot of a birthmark under his ear, pulled a slate from his belt, started at the far wall. They worked the bunks in pairs, lamp up, blanket lifted, a look at the chest, the brand on the wrist, the eyes, then move on. 6 bunks in, the shovel-jawed one stopped, lamp still over a bunk that wasn't breathing right. You twitched, he said. A voice from inside the blanket, younger than mine, cracked. I didn't. My eye saw what my eye saw. The slate scraped, a chalk line down a number I couldn't see. 1. Please. 2 for arguing. The slate scraped again. The blanket settled back over the boy without a sound. They came along our wall. I made my body the shape a sleeping body makes once it's given up arguing with the night. Shoveljaw lifted my blanket. The lamp came down close enough I felt the heat on my eyelashes. He looked at my wrist. 4127 still raw and pink, then my face. I kept my breath where the boy above had left his. The lamp moved on. Above me, the slate scraped again. Top bunk, hands. Then the sandy-haired boy showed his hands. Palms up, ink on the pads, fingers that didn't shake. Shoveljaw grunted and moved. They left without locking. Footsteps moved 2 doors down. Another lamp flared. Another blanket lifted. Another small voice saying please. I waited until their sound was eaten by a turn in the stone. 3, the boy above breathed. He had 3 already. They'll come for him before bell. That's strange? That's strange. His voice had the careful flatness of a boy who had used the word too often in his short life. I rolled my eyes up toward the slats. He was a shape against shadow, a shoulder, the pale of an ear catching the orange under the door. What's your name? A pause long enough to mean he'd been asked it badly before. Tovin. Semyon. That's not a number. No, I said, it isn't. Quiet a while. Then, the big one's Reno. He sleeps in the prefect's room and eats with Vane on 3rd day. The narrow one with the mark, Pell calls him Slate. He writes everything down. Everything. If you sneezed in your sleep last night, he had it on the morning slate before you opened your eyes. They're Vane's? They're Vane's eyes. Defectives are scrapped to them. You start defective the second they have ink on you. I tucked Reno and Slate where I'd tucked the painter's gap, behind the eyes. 2 names, 1 slate, 1 lazy bleed under the keyhole. A boy up top with ink on his fingers who hadn't flinched when a lamp came down hot near his face, and who knew the prefect's meal schedule. A forger. I'd wondered about the ink, and watching him hold his hands flat under that lamp told me he could lie with his fingers as easily as his mouth. Tovin. How fast can you copy a hand you've only seen once? The straw above me went still. When he answered, his voice had come closer to the slats. Why? Because somewhere along this corridor there's a door no prefect walks past, and tomorrow I need to be on the other side of it without my number on a slate. He breathed out, slow as a man who'd already accepted the answer he'd give. You're going to get me killed. I'm going to get us out. The bell rang again, 1 slow iron note, and from down the corridor came the soft, dragged sound of bare feet being walked somewhere they didn't want to go, and the sharper sound, just after, of a door I hadn't yet read swinging open on hinges that did, in fact, hear. The brass on the sealed door was still warm where I'd lifted my palm a heartbeat earlier. 3 doors down from the dorm, and the corridor ran black except for the underglow of the wall sconces. I'd slipped out into Tovin's silence, told myself I only needed a count, how many hinges between us and the stairwell where the prefect's room led out, how the master ward on this end door drew its lines. The door drew them wrong. 3 petals where there should be 4, the binding rune set half a finger too high on the jamb, a builder's compromise. Somebody had run short of leaf gold and finished the seal with a cheaper hand. I had my finger an inch from the seam, almost reading the bleed under it, when the boot scuffed. 1 scuff, then another. Stone on stone, deliberate, the way a man walks when he doesn't need to be quiet. I stepped back from the door. 3 steps to the alcove behind the wall buttress, and I'd be out of the lamp line. I took 1. The hermetic door at Block G shut in my head. Not the memory, the door itself. The 4/10ths of a second early drop, the way my own chest had locked once it understood the shape coming down. My ribs went the same way now. The borrowed lungs in this borrowed boy stopped moving and would not start. I tried to draw. Nothing came. The tight band behind the sternum sat there and would not give an inch. The footsteps rounded the corner. He came alone. No lamp, no escort, no robe of office. A tall man in a plain charcoal coat, gray at the temples, hands clasped behind his back like a tutor on a garden path. He stopped 6 feet from me and waited for me to remember to breathe. I did not remember. He watched the not breathing. He watched my eyes find his and stay there because they could not find anywhere else. He did not call for a prefect. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked at me the way a man looks at a clock that has stopped striking and may need to be opened. Number, he said. The band behind my sternum cracked half an inch and let a sip of air through. Not enough to live on. Enough to talk. 4127, I said, and the voice came out flatter than the breath behind it had any right to be. He nodded once, as if I had confirmed a small private guess. He did not ask what I was doing in the corridor. He did not ask why my hand had hovered near the seam of his door. He stepped closer, close enough for me to see no ring of office on either hand, only the faint blue ink mark of a sealmaster's chalk under one thumbnail. You stopped breathing, he said, conversational. Then you started again, in order. Most boys do one of those, not both. I did not answer. The band gave another half an inch, and I used the room to keep my face dead. Look at the door, 4127. I looked at the door. What do you see? Wrong question to ask me, wrong corridor to ask it in. The right answer scrolled in my head. 3 petals, half finger high, gold thinned at the eastern leaf, and I gave him a different one. A door, sir. He held the silence long enough to weigh it. Then he smiled, very small, very far back behind the eyes, and reached past my shoulder. His thumb pressed the brass plate I had been reading. The seal under his hand woke, hummed once, and slept again, recognizing its maker. A door, he repeated softly. Good. He stepped back without touching me. He had not raised the alarm, had not called a guard. He turned half toward the corridor he had come from and spoke as if to the stone. Hail! The proctor came around the corner, already moving, slate in hand, mouth open to receive an instruction. Vane did not look at him. 4127, he said, on the watch slate, not for punishment but for observation. He is reading the doors wrong. Hale's chalk scraped once across the slate. The number went down where my name should have been. Vane's eyes came back to me one more time, quiet, almost kind. Walk back to your dorm, child. I'll know if you take the long way. Vane's coat went around the buttress and stayed gone. I counted to 12 and walked back, hinges sliding past my shoulder one at a time, my hand off the brass plates. The man had said he would know. I believed him. The dorm latch lifted on Tovin's straw wedge. I slipped through and let it kiss shut. Tovin was awake before my heel found the floor. You came back, he breathed. He sent me. He. Sealmaster, in a coat, no ring. His mouth went thin. He pushed up on one elbow. Then we stop. You sit in that bunk until breakfast and we forget tonight. Tovin. I sank onto the edge of his straw. Look at the door. I have looked at it every night of my life. Look at it the way I do. From the inside, the dorm door was iron, a brass plate at chest height, 8 petals, 2 rings, a binding rune where they crossed. From 3 feet in the dark, it read as one shape. From 18 inches, it came apart. Outer ring for the dorm, inner ring for something else. The rune sat low, not flawed, placed. Underneath, the brass had a hairline that was not a scratch. A hatch. Not for boys, for the men who came back to feed the seal. I had drawn this in 8 projects. Every cage has a corridor for the people who clean it. Tovin, if I go through that wall and come back without the latch ever lifting, will you believe me about Vane? You can't go through that wall. Watch. I knelt and laid my palm flat on the brass, low, where the hairline ran. I followed it with my thumbnail and felt the click before I heard it. A tongue of metal giving up its tension half an inch behind the rune. The seal did not wake. It opened. The iron leaf stayed shut against the corridor. A panel the width of my shoulders sank back into the wall a finger at a time, the air behind it tasting of cold stone and chalk older than me. Block G shut in my head. The 4/10 early drop. Borrowed lungs in this borrowed boy stupid all over again. The band behind my sternum hauling itself tight, and I knelt and could not pull a breath. Tovin's fingers wrapped my wrist. Out or in? Pick one. Don't kneel in the door. I picked in. I crawled. The panel was waist high, and the second my back knee cleared the brass, the band cracked, then broke, my chest dragging a cold lungful that tasted of unswept years. Then I was up. The corridor was 18 inches wide and lit by nothing. I ran my palm along the left wall and counted seams. 3 for the dorm, a thickening where the chapel ward sat, a sconce shaft dripping lamp oil from above. 4 paces brought me abreast of the prefect's room. A vent breathed a draft onto my cheek. I put my eye to it and saw Reno yawning at a desk, not 3 feet away through stone. He did not hear me. I was on the other side of the building he thought he ran. I went back the way I came. Knee, hand, knee. I slid the panel shut, and the click put the seal back to sleep. The latch had never lifted. Vane would know. Tovin sat with both hands on his knees, mouth open. You went through a wall! I walked the gap the men who built it kept for themselves. Through a wall. The grin came up out of my chest without permission. I leaned close enough to smell the copy paper ink on his fingers. Every door here was drawn by a man who had to come back and fix it. I can read what he drew. I can walk where he walked. There is a corridor behind every wall in this academy nobody up there knows about. Nobody? Nobody who lives in the rooms. He breathed out, ragged. And Vane? I lay down on my bunk, the brand cold against my throat. 8 days. 1 root in my hand, 4,000 kids in the walls, and a sealmaster on a watch slate who already knew my number could read what he was not meant to read. The hatch went somewhere I had not yet followed. I could not follow it alone. Move up, 4127. The boy behind me jabbed his tray into my spine, and I shuffled forward. Morning. First bell after night 1. The hall smelled of boiled oats and lamp soot. 400 shaved heads bent over tin bowls in rows so straight you could lay a string against them. Tovin sat to my left, eyes ringed, working a spoon like a man trying to look ordinary and trying too hard. Stop staring at the wall, I murmured. I'm not. You're counting petals in your soup. He dropped his eyes back to the oats. I'd spent the dark hours after the hatch promising myself I'd walk the corridor twice more tonight, alone. 1 man with a tide of unlit stone and 4,000 kids asleep on top of him. By the bell, I knew what kind of stupid that was. A door is one job. A building is a crew. I'd built nothing alone in 17 years, and I wasn't going to start by killing children. So I lifted my head and read the room the way I read a floor plan. Bench 3, 4th from the window. A girl with her ear set flat against the stone column, fork halfway to her mouth, eyes glazed, listening. Not the wall listening you do when you're 9, the kind a piano tuner does to a struck wire. Tovin, the girl by the column. Name. He didn't lift his head. Mara, tin merchant's bastard, stone-touched, marked effective because she hears the bells coming 6 counts early and won't shut up about it. She hears stone. She hears stone. I filed her under acoustics. Every sealed building leaks sound through its veins. You only have to know who's listening. I'd paid surveyors a fortune for less. 2 benches down, hunched over a slate, a long-fingered boy was copying a demerit slip with a stub of charcoal. Copying it, not writing it. A real slip pinned under his thumb, a forgery growing under his pinky, and the forgery was already the better of the 2. Pell, Tovin said before I asked. Steward's son, gets caned for borrowing the prefect's hand. He copies the hand. He copies anything. He did Reno's signature for the dorm laundry, and Reno didn't notice till the wash came back blue. A grin tried to crack my face, and I shut it down behind a spoonful of oats. 3. Tovin to forge what we needed in ink and paper. Pell to forge what we needed in the prefect's own fist. Mara to put an ear to the stone and tell us where a boot was coming from before its owner did. To Vane, these were 3 names on a defective list, scrap pulled out of noble lines that wouldn't bleed clean. To me, they were a foreman's dream sheet. Acoustics, documents, signatures, the 3 things every prison crew I'd ever drawn against bribed first and broke second. Tovin, I kept my voice under the clatter of tin. I'm not going back in that wall alone tonight. I need her ear and his hand. Can you get them to the wash house at second bell? He went still, spoon halfway up. Pell, maybe. Mara doesn't trust anyone with a number. Then make her trust me by lunch. Semyon. 8 days. The slip you forge for me tonight has to be signed by Reno tomorrow morning, or we lose the Western dormitory." He swallowed, looked at Mara, looked at Pell, looked at the brand on his own wrist. Then his jaw set the way it had set at the dorm door at 3 in the morning. Second bell, wash house. I went back to my oats. Across the hall, Mara lifted her ear off the column, turned her head a quarter inch toward the south wall, and went the color of wet ash. She had heard something I had not. A drip hit the tile beside Mara's bare foot, and she didn't blink. Second bell. The wash house stood empty except for the three of us, and the long copper trough running the back wall, sweating in the gloom. Pell crouched by the door, a stub of charcoal between his teeth, watching the corridor through the keyhole. Mara was already at the stone, ear flat, palm flatter, eyes shut, mouth slack with attention. "You hear me?" I said. "Quieter." She didn't open her eyes. "You walk like a cartwheel." I shut up. I'd counted 3 blind copper risers running up into the dorm above before I crossed the threshold, but I needed her ear before my eyes did the talking. I crouched on the wet flag beside her. "What did you hear in the hall?" Her jaw worked. "Something pulling, down through the south wall, slow." "Pulling what?" "Don't know yet." She slid 4 fingers higher, tapped once, listened. "It's got a beat, like Father's siphon when he bled the tin." Pell hissed from the door. "Patrol, 2, Reno's lot." Boots in the corridor, the rhythm of men who knew the floor better than the floor knew them. Pell, into the trough. I lifted the wooden lid. "Mara, with me, behind the boiler." "I'm not done." "You're done if Reno opens that door." She moved. We folded behind the iron belly of the boiler, with the heat of it sweating my shirt to my spine, and through a half-inch gap, I watched the door bang inward against its hook. 2 prefects, tall one with a slate, short one with a cane brass-capped at the foot. The short one looked straight at the trough where Pell had vanished and didn't see him. "Empty," he said. "Mark it." The slate scratched. The cane tapped twice on the flagstone, once on the copper trough, and the trough rang. Not the dead bong of a half-full pipe, a long, lifting hum, the note copper gives back when something is moving through it. Mara's hand closed on my wrist hard enough to leave marks. "Semyon, it's not water in that pipe." The boots receded, the latch clicked. Pell came up out of the trough, pale and slick, and Mara was already crawling along the copper run on her hands and knees, ear bumping the metal as she went. "Up here, it joins a bigger one. Listen." I put my ear where hers had been. Under my cheek, the copper was warm, and the hum was a slow, deliberate thing. The suck a butcher's drain makes when something has hung over it long enough. And woven through that suck was a sound I knew from no plumbing on earth, a child's heartbeat, slow, and another beside it, and another. 3 or 4 faint pulses braided into the draw. I came off the pipe and sat back on my heels. "They're not wards," I said. My voice came out level, and that was the worst of it. "Pell, look up." He looked. Above us, the ceiling was a forest of brass rings, each ring centered over a bunk in the dorm 1 floor up, each ring punched with the 8 petals I'd thumbed open in our own door at 3 in the morning. "They're taps," Pell whispered. "They're taps." I stood. The trough at our backs lifted its little hum again, patient, on schedule. The verse doesn't bind us to the wards. The wards drain us into something, and whatever's at the other end of this pipe is already drinking. Mara turned her ear toward the south wall, her mouth opening to tell me where the pipe went next, and stopped. Footsteps. Not in the corridor this time, above us, inside the dorm. The dorm ceiling thumped twice, and dust sifted down between the brass tap rings onto the back of Mara's neck. "Out," I breathed. "Pell, lid. Mara, move." Pell dropped the trough lid, and Mara was already at the door, palm flat to the wood, listening through it the way she'd listened through the stone. She shook her head once and stepped back. "Wrong door." "Service hatch behind the boiler," I whispered. "Both of you, I'll pull them past." "Semyon." "Lunch, wash house, don't be late." I shoved them at the gap behind the iron belly and walked into the corridor before my legs could think about it. The tall prefect with the slate was 3 strides off, the short one with the brass-capped cane behind him. Their faces lit when they saw me, not surprise, confirmation. The slate came up. 4127, out of bunk at second bell. Wash house? Looking for the laundry. Wrong floor. My mistake. The cane swung in a lazy arc and tapped the wall behind me. I heard a click that was not for me to hear, and a door I hadn't drawn yet opened in my shoulder blade. In. It wasn't a room. It was a cell built for one task. Narrow stone, ceiling low enough I'd have to stoop. A single drain in the floor with a lip of crusted black around it. The kind of room where you put a boy when you want him quieter for the slate. The door shut behind me with the soft suck of good masonry. I knew the lock. I knew the leaf, the hinge, the rune set low and lazy at the foot. I'd thumbed open its cousin in our own dorm and walked away whistling. The walls came in half an inch. They didn't. I knew they didn't. But the plate at chest height waited under my thumb, and I lifted my hand to it, and the hand stopped at my collarbone and would not go further. Air went out of me and didn't come back. The ceiling pressed. Block G's hermetic door dropped inside my ribs, the way it had dropped on the man whose body I was wearing. And the room was that gap, that 0.4 seconds, that final, unfinished breath. And I was inside it again, and my mouth was open, and nothing was going in. Through the iron leaf came the short prefect's voice, pleased with itself. There it is. Marn, slate it. Subject 4127, panic event, holding cell 9. Slated. Vane wants it on the chamber lens.
Walk him.
The door opened. I did not see it open. I felt the air change and the stone unclench a finger, and I dragged half a breath out of nothing, like a man pulling water from a stone. A boot nudged my shoulder. Up. I got one knee under me, the other wouldn't. The cane tapped under my chin and lifted my face into the slate's flat eye. Subject ambulatory, the tall one said, scratching. Escort to processing. Lens room 4. On your feet, builder. We'll find you a smaller one. They took an elbow each and the corridor tilted. We went past the washhouse door. Mara's eyes wide at the keyhole, Pell's hand clamped over her mouth, and on toward the south stair, where the air smelled of lye, and something underneath the lye that I now knew was a slow, patient drinking. My feet went. My chest still hadn't. At the head of the stair, the short prefect leaned his mouth close to my ear, warm as a friend telling a secret. Don't worry, the chamber's smaller than the box. The stair started down. The cane prefect's whistle went down the stair ahead of us. 3 down, 5 down. The slate at Marn's hip clicked against a buckle every other step, and the stones were warm from old boots and lamp oil. I counted drains. A tongue of black mortar lipped the first landing, where a century of soft water had worked the stone down. Another at the second turn. A third tucked under the riser where no scrub brush ever went. Every cell upstairs had one of those mouths, and every mouth was feeding the same throat. The main pipe that ran south under our boots to wherever Vane had already set his lip. I had been thinking like a man with a key, a man who could face a door. The door had folded me at the collarbone and slated me for Vane's lens. And it would fold me again at lens room 4 and at every lens room after, because the door was the place my body refused to go. The throat was not a door. Stop fighting doors and follow water down. Marn cracked his knuckles between my shoulder blades and barked at my feet. I picked them up and let 3 knuckles drag the wall as I went, steadying myself on a stair I didn't trust. The mortar took the sound thin and carried it sideways the way Mara had taught me stone could carry. Under the drag, I tapped a 4 beat that Pell had inked onto Mara's wrist over breakfast. Long, short, 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 when she'd thought I wasn't watching her hands. Washhouse, south pipe, and down to the throat. If Mara's ear was on the trough up there, she had me and could chase me through stone. If it wasn't, I had a copper bell and a chair and nothing at all to put between my crew and them. The cane prefect glanced back over his shoulder, smiling like a man who'd already drawn the next 3 cards in his hand. Quiet down there, builder. Save it for the lens. You'll want all that air in your chest later. I saved it. We came off the last flight into a low corridor that smelled of lye, and, under the lye, that slow, patient drinking. 2 doors. The left one stood open on a stripped chair under a copper bell. Lens room 4. The cane prefect did not go left. He stopped at the right-hand door, the service stair climbing back to the washhouse, and cocked his head, listening, and his smile slid wider. "Marn, up! Vane wants a forger on the slate before third bell, and our small one with the ink stains will sign as nicely as Tovin. Bring her down." Marn was already moving. "Sit him!" The cane prefect's hand cuffed my shoulder and dropped me on the stripped chair under the copper bell. The seat was warm from whoever sat there last. The leather wrist strap on the armrest was darker inside than out. A lot of hands had sweated through that buckle. He didn't fasten it. He left it hanging where I could watch it work. Above us, the service stair coughed footsteps. Marn was already coming back, fast, which meant Pell hadn't bolted, which meant Mara had clamped a hand on her wrist and held her in the wash house, because Mara was smarter than I'd given her credit for. Pell came around the turn with Marn's slate hand at the back of her neck. Her cheeks were the color of new paper. "There she is." The cane prefect smiled like a man welcoming a friend in. "Ink stains. Stool." Marn set her on a three-leg stool a foot from my chair and slid a board onto her knees. On the board, a stack of warden's chits, Academy demerits, ruled and stamped, the top one half filled in Vane's flat hand. "Pell, isn't it?" The cane prefect crouched to her face, voice gone honey soft. "You copy hands. We've watched. You did Brother Hen's mark on a kitchen pass last winter, and Hen never blinked. That's a gift, that." Her throat worked. Her fingers crawled toward the ink pot without her telling them to. "Finish 6 of these by third bell," he said, gentle as a tutor. "Western dormitory names. Anyone Vane's flagged, strange. Your hand on a brother's signature 6 times, and we walk you back up." She didn't move. "Or," he said, turning a chit and tapping lens room 4 through the doorway, "we put you in that chair instead of him. The bell hums and we read what's in your bones. You won't be a forger after. You won't be much of anything." Pell's pen touched the ink pot. The nib trembled the meniscus and didn't break it. I used the voice I'd used on foremen who wanted to pour bad concrete on a Friday. Steady, bored, owning the room. "Pell, don't sign for him." Her eyes came to me, glassy. I kept going before the cane could cut me off. 6 names buys you nothing. He'll ask 6 more by supper, and 12 by lights out, and tomorrow your hand belongs to him all the way to the verse. The cane prefect straightened, the smile tightening on his teeth. "Builder, you talk a lot for a man with no breath. I'm offering her a better deal." My eyes stayed on Pell. "Boiler hatch in the wash house. You know it. You came down it this morning. I know 3 more like that one. Copy from me instead. Tovin's hand, Renault's hand, any brother on the 3rd floor. And walk with me out of this corridor before bell." The cane prefect laughed once, a single dry bark that didn't bother to hide what he thought of me. "How does the chair warmer offer anything exactly? I'll show you." He turned his head. That was all I needed. I came up off the chair with the wrist strap already in my fist and whipped it across his cane arm, not to hold him, just to brace the cane's iron ferrule against the seam in the wall plate behind him. I'd been reading that seam since I sat down. The masons had set the stone proud by half a finger because a service stair ran behind it. The plate clicked. A panel went dark behind his shoulder, and Pell saw it before either prefect did. Her pen came up off the chit. Marn lunged for me. The cane prefect's free hand went for his whistle. I caught Pell's eye and gave her one word. "Run." Up the south stair a copper bell rang 4 short. Long, short, short, short. And the cane prefect's whistle stopped halfway to his teeth. The panel coughed cold air into my face. Old air, dry as flour, the smell of stone that hadn't been breathed since the masons left. Pell saw it open. Pell moved. She went past my elbow at a low scuttle, the warden's chits sliding off her knees and fanning across the tile in a white flutter that bought me the half-second I needed. I followed her in shoulder first and dragged the strap with me. The plate sucked shut behind us on a click I felt in my teeth. Behind the stone, Marn cursed. The cane prefect didn't blow his whistle. He couldn't. The bell up the south stair was still going long, short, short, short. And a man who answered a 4 short with brass instead of boots was a man who got the cane himself. 2 minutes, maybe. Don't run yet, I breathed at Pell's back. Walk where I walk, step where I step. The corridor was a finger wider than my shoulders. A mason's plumb line had been scratched into the right wall at hip height. A working mark, the kind no warden ever sees, because no warden ever comes down here. I read it like a sentence as we went. 2 dog legs ahead, a drop into the boiler run, a vent under the washhouse drain. I logged each turn the way I'd logged poured walls in Block G. Left, 6 paces, dogleg right, low lintel, mind the head, building it inside my skull while my feet did the moving. A drawing nobody upstairs owned, a drawing that was mine now. Pell's breath went ragged at the second turn. I caught her sleeve. Eyes on my heel. We're going up to your friend. She held me, Pell whispered. Mara, she held my wrist. I know. We're going to get her. The vent grate came up under our feet, warm and wet, washhouse water draining through. I pried it on the hinge I'd guessed was there, and was right. Above us, bare feet on tile. Mara's. I knew the weight of that step from this morning. I tapped the underside of a brass tap ring twice with the strap buckle. Her face appeared in the grate, upside down, hair in the steam. She didn't gasp, she didn't ask. She lay flat and shoved her hand through. Up! Mara hauled Pell sister quick. I came after, knees grinding on the rim, and pulled the grate down behind me with a soft iron clack the washhouse steam ate whole. 3 of us. 1 wet floor. No prefect on it. Mara's eyes found mine. You came back for her. I came back with a corridor. My voice came out lower than I expected, almost steady. Tovin next, then a list. She looked at me a beat too long and nodded once, the way a foreman nods when he's decided to pour your concrete after all. I scratched a quick mark into the seam between 2 tiles with the strap buckle. A dot, a slash, a dot. Service vent. Mine. The mason's plumb line down there was the first true line I'd seen in this building. It would not be the last. Above us, 3 long bells rolled across the roof. Vane's count. He hadn't found the panel yet. He would find what we'd left behind it. 6 half-filled chits, an open ink pot, Pell's thumbprint on the rim. By 3rd bell, he'd own a story about us we hadn't written. A black slate hung from the refectory beam, chalk still wet on it. My number, 4127, at the head of the morning's offenders in a hand I'd never seen. Under the number ran 3 charges: theft from the bread store, a blow against Prefect Halsh, and words spoken against the verse. I'd been in the room 4 minutes. Long enough to take a tin bowl off the stack and step into the lunch queue with Mara on my left and Pell wedged between us, still smelling of washhouse steam. Long enough to watch a duty prefect, tall boy, gold cuff, gold thumb ring, climb the bench and knock the slate with his knuckle. 4127. He didn't look up from his roll. Theft, store, strike upon Prefect Halsh. Blasphemy on the verse, witnessed by 2 of the cohort. Sentence to be said at 3rd bell. A boy at the front of the queue turned his head. Then another, and the bowls in their hands went still. Halsh I'd never met. The storeroom I'd never been inside. I had not, in this brief and ridiculous second life, found a minute spare to blaspheme a verse I was busy trying to break. That was the elegance. None of it had to be true. Mara's knuckles went white on her bowl, and Pell's breath thinned beside me, the kind of thin where a chest forgets to lift. A girl 2 places ahead stepped sideways out of the queue, just a little, just enough that the boy behind her did not have to stand near my shoulder. Bowls up, I said under my breath. Eyes forward, don't move. Pell's tin trembled against her thumbnail. Mara obeyed without looking at me, and that was worse than if she'd argued. The duty prefect came down off the bench with a fold of chits in his cuff and started peeling them off, one by one, onto the trays of the boys around me, not mine. A chit on the tray meant witness mark. Sign it, and the cohort had seen what the slate said. He stopped at the boy behind me and held the chit out. The boy looked at the chit, then at my back, and then he took the prefect's stub of charcoal and put his cross on the paper, eyes on his bowl the whole time. The boy behind him did the same. So did the next. 6 chits down the line, and I hadn't moved my feet. I'd only counted. 6 witnesses by lunch. 60 by supper, and by tomorrow morning, the cohort would know, with paper to prove it, that student 4127 stole bread, struck prefects, and spat on the holy work. Pell turned her face a quarter towards me without turning her head. Her lips barely moved. "Did you go in the storeroom?" She wasn't accusing. She was asking the way a child asks if the dark behind a door is empty, hoping for the right answer, already half believing the wrong one. Mara heard it. Her chin came around an inch, and her eyes settled on me and stayed. The duty prefect reached the end of the line and turned, and his thumb ring caught the lamplight as he started back up the queue with a fresh handful of chits, and the boy who'd spat on the tile by the bread tray spat again, closer to my heel this time. I opened my mouth to give Pell the right answer. Mara's hand closed on my sleeve before any of it got out. "Not here," she said, very low. "Not with paper coming down a line. Walk it back to me later." She let go. She did not look at me again. Third bell hadn't rung yet when hammers started up in the south arcade. I came around the buttress at a walk, bowl back on the stack, Mara and Pell scattered, refectory at my back, and stopped inside the colonnade, shoulder against cold sandstone. Two smiths in leather aprons, a brazier, coals red, iron strap, hot, pinched in tongs and hammered flat over the tile seam I'd marked not an hour back. ... Gone under a band of black iron the width of my hand. A prefect stood at their elbow with a slate and a stub of chalk. Not Halsh, older, gold cuff, no thumb ring, jaw like a brick, making a tick with every strap. Down the arcade, 3 more men were doing the same to the vent grill at the laundry stair. I didn't move for a long second. I breathed through my nose and counted straps the way a foreman counts boards. 6 at this vent, 4 at the next, a stack on the cart. A boy walked past with a pail. He saw the iron, saw my face, kept walking. The prefect heard the scuff of my heel and looked up. Number. He didn't ask, just held the chalk ready. 4127. He wrote it slowly, watching me sideways. Then he turned and tapped the strap with the chalk end. 2 more on this one. Then the chase behind the bakehouse. Rector wants every service plate strapped before the gong. Before evening? The smith asked, not looking up. Before the new gong. The hammer paused half a heartbeat, came down. Which new gong? Day 5 at first light, said the prefect. Verse begins 3 days early. Rector's word. He'll cry it from the chapter house at third bell. The smith blew through his teeth, didn't stop hammering. The strap took another blow and bedded into the lime, sealing my ... under a finger's width of metal no school-issue buckle would ever scratch through. Day 5. 5 days from where I stood. 3 off my 8 before I'd drawn a breath on a third. My mouth did something useful before the rest of me caught up. "Sir," I said. The prefect's chin came up. "Where do the refectory boys go at the new gong?" I sounded like a boy angling for free time. He snorted, didn't bother to answer. He didn't send me away either. That was when Vane came down the arcade. Alone, no escort, the way he had in the lens room. Black coat, no gold, walking through his own building like he owned every brick, because he did. He stopped 2 paces off. His eyes went past me to the iron strap on my mark. Number. Same word, different mouth, different weight. 4127, sir. Yes. A small flat sound. Do you know what this is, 4127? A repair, sir. The corner of his mouth ticked up a quarter and went flat. A reroute, he said. Old building, old veins. We've decided to bleed them somewhere cleaner. He turned his head an inch and looked at my face. Day 5 at first light, verse advanced. The chapter will be read at third bell. You will be where the duty prefect tells you to be. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. Good. He let the words sit. The smith laid another strap to the heat. I have rats in my service corridor, 4127. Tonight, every plate in the south wing closes. Tomorrow morning, the west wing. By day 4, there'll be no corridor in this academy a clever boy can crawl. Whoever is in the walls when the iron goes on will be in the walls when the verse begins. He waited a beat to see what my face would do. I kept it flat. The strap took another blow. "Go to your dorm," he said. "Wait for the gong." He stepped past me without brushing my sleeve, and the prefect ticked his slate. The hammer fell again, and the seam I'd cut an hour ago disappeared under a second band of iron. I walked. South Colonnade, Bakehouse Turn, Laundry Stair, every door I'd marked going dark under a smith's hammer as I passed. Every dot/dot eaten by black iron and the patient tick of chalk on slate. 5 days. Tovin still off in the western dorm with a slip nobody had signed. Pell tucked into a bunk where 6 boys had already crossed her friend off a list. Mara waiting on an accounting I had no corridor to give her in. Behind me, the man in the black coat walked the other way down the arcade, not hurrying, not once looking back, because he was certain he had me in his walls. The copper finial on the cloister rail ran warm without a hand on it. No sun yet, no fire near, just the metal breathing heat from inside. That was the system breathing, pressure in the rail, pushing toward the wing they were sealing. They'd shut the doors. The mains were still on. I didn't go to the dorm. I cut left at the bakehouse turn, into the gap between kitchen yard and lower cloister, where the cooks pitched their ash. The regulator house squatted under the back steps. Lead roof, no window, a school padlock on the door any kitchen boy could pick with a fork. Tovin was already there, crouched by the ash heap with a slop bucket and a face that hadn't learned how to be invisible yet. "You're late," he said. "I waited where you said." Vane was in the arcade. His mouth opened, closed. "He saw you." "He saw a number." I knelt to the lock. "Take the corner. Anyone comes round the bakehouse, drop the bucket." The padlock gave on the third tooth. I'd drawn that lock stock on a slate in week 1. Soft brass, 3 wards, no shoulder, same shape as Warden's issue I used to spec back home. The hasp came off in my hand. Inside smelled of hot lead and old oil. A brass manifold the size of a calf squatted on a stone plinth, 5 pipes going out of it, south, west, infirmary, chapter, kitchens, each with a wheel tap above and a little glass bubble riding a stem to show flow. I read them the way you read a foreman's slate at shift end. South tap, full open. West, 3/4. Chapter, half. Infirmary, a trickle. Kitchens, fat. Iron straps on the south wing meant the south rooms were drinking with the mouth shut. Drink with the mouth shut, you swell. Pressure in that wing was already piling up against a wall of plates and bands and Vane's certainty. Good. He'd done half my work for me. I put my hand on the south wheel and did not turn it. "Sem!" Tovin's voice from the door, low. "What are you doing? We routing water round a broken main. This isn't water. Same arithmetic." I touched the west wheel. "Close south now. The boilermen feel it in the bakehouse inside 10 minutes, and a prefect comes asking. So I don't close south. I open west." I cranked the west tap a full turn. The glass bubble jumped, juddered, climbed the stem. In the wall, a pipe began to tick the way a kettle ticks, finding its temperature. Now the manifold's hungry. South stays open, but I crouched, found the bleed cock on the underside of the south branch, the little brass nipple no one ever opens because it's for masons in summer. South leaks. The bleed gave a quarter turn. A thin hiss came out of it, drier than steam, the kind of air I'd tasted in the panel 2 days back. "That's a finger hole," Tovin whispered. "It'll do nothing. In a sealed wing, it's the only mouth." I stood, wiped my hand down my trouser, listened. Through the lead roof, faint and slow, the south wing began to breathe out the wrong way. Pressure walking backward up the pipe toward the plates holding, the air behind them thinning, and a service door I'd marked on my first day, held shut for 40 years by nothing but warm manna pushing on its inner face. Take the push away, the door remembers it's only wood. I handed Tovin the padlock to set the hasp back like nothing had moved. He fumbled it, dropped a key onto the lead step, hissed through his teeth. "Pick it up, slowly." He picked it up, the lock clicked home. We were 3 steps from the bakehouse turn when the chapter bell told the half, not third bell, the half before, and out of the south arcade, clear as a slate snapped in 2, came the sound of a door no one had opened in a generation, easing off its frame with a long, low sigh. A boy shouted. Not a prefect, a boy. Then the other sound, boots, running, not from the arcade, from above us, on the kitchen yard wall where no boy had business being and no prefect ran for the joy of it. 3 pairs of soles slapping lead, coming fast along the roofline toward the regulator house we'd just locked behind us. Tovin went the color of the ash heap. "Sem," he said, "who knew we were here?" A slate cracked off the kitchen yard gutter and broke on the step between us. Tovin flinched. I shoved him into the alcove under the back stairs and went the other way. Not toward the cloister, toward the one door those runners couldn't watch from a roof. The coal hatch into the undercellar. A grate no kitchen boy bothered with, its chain rusted into one piece. I snapped the chain off its staple with the padlock's own shackle, 3 twists, a brass cough, and dropped through. The hatch banged shut. Boots drummed above, fast, going the wrong way along the lead. A man chasing a hatch he could see and missing the one he couldn't. Good. I'd marked this cellar on day 3. Low brick vault, a stub of corridor running south, the south wing's foundations behind 18 inches of stone, and a service door no one had touched since the masons signed it. The smell was hot and wrong. The dry flower air I'd let out the bleedcock, only thicker, riding the brick like breath off a sick mouth. Above me, somebody yelled my number. Not my name, my number, the way a clerk shouts down a roster. Vane's voice, half a courtyard off, closer than I wanted. 4127, South Stair, South Stair! I went south at a run, head ducked under the vault. 20 paces in, the corridor narrowed to a brick throat that opened into a chamber I had not drawn. Plinth in the middle, 4 iron hoops in the floor for ropes long gone. Above the plinth, flush into the south wall, a steel-banded door I knew the shape of before I knew where I was. I knew that door. I'd died behind one like it. Different city, different name, same arithmetic. A sealed room, a stuck door, the air thinning, my fists going soft on iron, and a foreman shouting my name on the wrong side of the metal. I'd put my shoulder to the wood and stayed there until my shoulder stopped meaning anything. The chamber gave a sound I felt in my teeth. The pressure I'd walked backward up the pipe had found this place. Of course it had. The south wing's lowest mouth was right here, and Vane's straps and plates had pushed all that swollen mana down to the only soft seal left. This door, this room, the man in it. A crack opened in the mortar overhead, and dust hissed in a thin gray line. "South stair clear!" a runner shouted, lead drumming. "Vane, the cellar hatch, chains off!" Boots on the hatch, boots on the steps behind me. I went for the door, palm on iron. Hot. Hotter than the rail at the finial, the band singing under my hand in that low note I'd heard once and never wanted again. Break this door, the south wing breathes through me. Stay here, the chamber eats itself with me in it. I took my hand off the iron. I turned my back on the door. Behind the plinth, where the floor sloped to a black slot for Mason's water, a small brass cock sat in the brick. Not a bleed, a router. The throttle that fed this chamber and only this chamber. Mason's work, 40 years of dust packed into its threads. I went down on my knees and got both thumbs around it. It would not move. Footsteps in the corridor, slow now, spread out. 3 men who knew how to bracket a man in a brick room. I spat in my palms. Set my shoulders. Told that cock the only thing it needed to hear. That I'd already died once for not being clever enough at exactly this moment, and wouldn't do it twice. It gave under my thumbs. An eighth of a turn, then another, and the hiss changed pitch on the same breath. The bands above the plinth stopped singing and started ticking, fast, then slow. Pressure walked out of the chamber the way I'd walked it out of the wing, backward up its own pipe, toward the manifold and the west tap I'd cranked wide, the seal feeding the seal, the wing's swollen mouth drinking its own breath till it was gone. The door above the plinth eased a 1/4 inch off its frame and stopped. Dust quit hissing from the mortar. My next breath came in clean, went out, came in again, and the chamber stopped pushing against me. A boot scraped brick at the corridor mouth. "Hold him there," Vane said, very close. The man who came round the corner wasn't a prefect.
and he wasn't reaching for me. He was staring past my shoulder, at the door easing wider on its own, at the thin black line of dark behind it, and at the top 3 rungs of an iron ladder going down into something none of us had a name for yet. The man at the corner forgot me. His eyes slid off my face and stuck on the ladder, on the thin black mouth easing wider behind the plinth, and his hand on the doorframe stopped being a hand that meant to grab anyone. I'd worn that look myself, back home. A foreman the first time he sees the inside of a wall he'd been signing off on for 20 years. Behind me, the banded door breathed open another inch. Cold came up the rungs. Not the dry flower heat I'd let out of the wing. Clean cold, old cold. The breath of a place sealed before any of these school walls went up. I knew that smell. Mortar cured in the dark. Iron that hadn't sweated since the masons left. And under it, the faintest tang of brass, kept oiled by hands nobody had names for anymore. Some architect dead a long time, smarter than the men who'd inherited his drawings, had laid a level underneath the foundations and left a service ladder beneath every seal in the cloister. The bands above the plinth were his signature. The router cock behind the plinth had been his mercy. The ladder was his back door, and it ran the spine of the whole school. I'd drawn doors like that too, never enough of them. "Hold him there," Vane said again, closer in the corridor, and the man at the corner did not move, because Vane's order had nothing to do with what he was staring at. I took 1 step toward the plinth. "Stay," he said, in a voice that had forgotten the word as it left his mouth. I took another. He raised his baton an inch and set it down again, the iron tip ticking on the brick. His throat worked around a question before he asked it. "What's down there?" he said. "My side of the door," I said. I heard the line land. A runner pulled up behind him, breath sawing the corridor in half, and Vane's boot scraped brick 3 paces off. The small hitch of a man who'd counted on every door in the south wing answering to his key, and had just been told the cellar had its own. I stepped onto the plinth, got my palm flat on the band. The iron was cool now, ticking slow as a kettle going off the boil, and the door gave under my hand without arguing. The dark behind it had shape. A passage ran south under the foundations, and a second ladder mouth glinted at the edge of sight by 1 greased bracket. Somebody had kept those bolts oiled, decade on decade, and never told a prefect about it. Below the rungs, set into the brick at arm's reach, ran a row of routered cocks. 1 for the south wing, 1 for the kitchens, 1 marked in a mason's faint scratch, "Bell," 1 for the dormer above. Brass tongues, all of them, fed off the same spine I'd just learned the shape of. I put my hand on the south wing cock and did not turn it, just stood there with the metal warming under my palm. 4127, Vane said, very close, voice gone flat the way a voice goes when its owner has just done the arithmetic he didn't want to do. "Step off that ladder." I put my boot on the top rung. "Send the runners home," I said, loud enough to reach him. "The south wing isn't yours anymore. The kitchens answer to a brass cock the size of my thumb, and the bell goes silent on a quarter turn." Quiet in the corridor. The man at the corner took half a step back without meaning to. "You still own the doors I haven't found yet," I told Vane. "Come find me at one of them." I went down 3 rungs and pulled the banded door shut behind me. It seated against its frame with the same soft, expensive sound my own cell door had made on day 1, and this time I was on the right side of it. The corridor above went quiet enough that I could hear my breath in the brick. A long way down, in the cold, under the cold, something dripped onto stone in a rhythm that wasn't water. Drip, pause, drip. Something was already down here, and it had heard me come. Tovin's wrench slipped off the brass collar and barked his knuckle open before the cock gave its quarter turn. He swore, sucked the cut. The lamp wick at his elbow drew the warm manna down its throat and put a Bluetooth of light onto the brick. He hadn't come easy. I dogged the banded door shut behind me, so he'd felt out the dry maintenance shaft and climbed down on his own. "Hold there," I said. I cupped my palm under the bracket. Thin bleed, steady. No kick. "Quarter turn, not a hair more." The kitchen cocks I left alone. A cook with cold hands on a warm tap notices fast. This one's a dead riser nobody's read in 50 years. Stealing. He tried the word like a bad nut. Off the school. Off the school, I said. Same school that plans to bleed 4,000 of us into batteries on a calendar I've already read? I'll lose sleep over a dead riser tomorrow. The flame steadied and walked itself up the passage, finding things, a brick vault running south, a second bracket 20 paces on, then a third, every lamp socket cut and waiting for a wick none of these prefects had ever lit. Tovin's mouth opened and closed without saying the thing he'd been about to. He meant for it to be lived in. He meant for somebody to get out, I said. Pop the next two. He popped them. The little blue teeth chewed the dark back to a shape we could measure. Air moved against my cheek. Clean air, pulled down a vent I hadn't found yet, pushed by the same pressure I'd borrowed off the dead riser. Breath. Light. The two things prefects had rationed all our lives, and they ran together off one quarter-turn cock. I went to the second bracket and pried up a floor slate with my knife. The hollow under it ran knee-deep, dry as old paper, lined in slabs that hadn't seen damp since the masons walked off. Saltfish, I said, and let the slate down soft. Black bread, apples bedded in straw, anything that keeps. Tell the kids who come down to bring food, not blankets. Blankets we can pull off any cot upstairs. Kids who come down, Tovin said. How do they know to come? They'll know when the bell doesn't ring. The rungs above the banded door creaked before I'd finished the sentence. Tovin went still. A pair of small boots felt their way down, careful, careful. Then a second behind them, and a girl no older than 10 dropped off the last rung with a heel of black bread wrapped in a rag, and behind her, a boy lowered a stoneware jar of pickled cabbage like an infant he didn't trust himself to hold. Down here? The girl said, not asking permission, just where to set the jar. Down here, I said, and pointed past Tovin at the slate I'd pried up. Second one, under the blue light. Mind the lip when you set it. She went. The boy followed with the cabbage cradled in both arms. Above them, a third pair of boots was already on the top rung. Tovin watched the jars line up in the dry hollow and said, low at my shoulder, "This isn't a hidey hole." No, I kept my voice the same size as his. Hidey holes face inward. This one's got a south passage we haven't walked yet, a vent pulling clean air from somewhere I can't see, and a ladder going down past the brick into the cold. It faces out. His knuckle had stopped bleeding. The next set of boots reached the floor, a boy with his arm in a dirty sling and a jaw I hadn't sat across from in any refectory. I marked him in the lamplight without letting my eyes do the marking. Behind him, another pair of feet hit the brick, and another. By the time the rung above stopped creaking, a small crowd stood breathing my borrowed air in my borrowed light, and somewhere in that crowd was a face here on a wage I hadn't paid. Names, I said, quiet ones. Bunkrow, what you brought, who told you to come? I set Tovin at the slate with a stub of charcoal and put my back to the south passage so I could read each face as it came past the second bracket into the blue tooth of light. The kids lined up without being told, the way kids line up for soup. The girl with the heel of black bread first. Mira, 4th hall, west bunks. My sister said come when the bell stayed quiet. I nodded her past. Tovin scratched her down. The cabbage boy stepped up next. Pell, 3rd hall, east. Cook's nephew. He heard me crying about the calendar and pushed me out the kitchen door with the jar. Pass. The next. The next. A laundry kid with red hands. A girl who couldn't read but knew every brick in the chapel by feel. A thin boy with the green smear of brass shop work at his nail beds. Each one came with a thing to eat and an answer that fit the wear of their cuffs. Then the sling. He stepped up easy, black bread under his good arm, a clean wrap of new linen, folded square, the kind of fold a pantry hand makes when somebody is watching. Name, I said. Ivor, Dortoir C. Tovin's charcoal stopped scratching. He didn't look up. He didn't have to. I held the boy's eye. Dortoir C, I said, mild. Who taught you to say it that way? His mouth worked. That's what it is. That's what the slate over the door says. The kids inside call it the 3rd hall. Behind him, another pair of boots hit the brick. I lifted my palm without turning, and the line stopped where it stood. I came around the slate to him slow. I lifted the dirty sling clear of his wrist. The skin underneath was soft as a clerk's. No chalk in the creases, no vat red, none of the copper green every brass shop boy in this school carried at his nail beds by 12. "Show me the arm," I said. He didn't. I unwound the sling one turn. The cloth was filthy on the outside and clean on the inside. Dirt rubbed on, not earned. Mira, who had set her bread in the hollow, stood up at the back and went very still. "Who sent you down?" He looked at the rungs above the banded door. He looked at the lamp wicks. He looked at his own bread, at the lip of the slate, at everything except at me. "The prefect on the south landing," he said, small. "Master Vane's runner. He gave me the bread and the sling and said where to wait for the bell that didn't ring." Tovin set the charcoal down. He set it down with care, the way you set down a thing you might pick up and break. "How many of you?" I asked. Just me down." "Today." He swallowed. "Today." I straightened. The vault held its breath under 12 children, a wrenchman, an informer in a clean sling, and the soft scrape of more boots feeling for the top rung above the banded door. Tovin found his voice at my ear, low and shaking. "We turn him out. Up the shaft. Now." Up the shaft he tells Vane where the dry hollow is. "We keep him?" "Keep him here, he tells the next breadline kid by morning." "Then what, Sem? What?" I didn't answer him. I crouched to Ivor's level and put my handlight on his good shoulder. He flinched like I'd raised a fist. "How did the runner know to send you?" I said. "He didn't know there was a down here this morning. None of them did. Who told Vane there was a floor under the floor?" Ivor's eyes went past me to the south passage, past the second bracket, past the third. He wet his lip. "He didn't send me to find a hole," the boy whispered. "He sent me to find you. Master Vane already knows your name." A body dropped feet first through the maintenance shaft and hit the brick at Tovin's boot. Mira's sister, scraped raw at the elbows, breath knocking out of her in one word. "Sweep!" "Where?" "South Colonnade. Defectives lined up. Vane's runner with a slate." I was up the rungs before she finished saying the name. "Sem..." Tovin came after me, swallowed by the shaft. "The boy..." "Sit on him. Don't kill him." Above the banded door, I cut into the dry chase, elbows on brick, lamp behind me dying to a coin of blue, and came up under the larder lid where Pride Oak met the pantry floor. I lifted it a finger's width. Empty pantry. Past the bread rack, through the open arch, the cloister yard was loud. I counted before I looked. Iron-shod heels, 3 pair. A whistle, short, long. The thin scrape of a slate set on a trestle. A man's voice reading, "Fen, Oriel, dressed, Quill." Names off a list. The defectives list. 9 days short of a calendar I had already read in the basement. I slid out and went flat behind the bread rack. Through the arch, 20-odd children pushed shoulder to shoulder along the south colonnade. A boy whose hand wouldn't open. A girl with her head tilted down onto her own shoulder. A skinny one, breathing wrong. 2 prefects walking the line with rods. The third, the South Landing runner, Vane's man, stood at the trestle checking faces against names. Bread rack between me and him. Pantry door between me and the line. A larder lid behind me that opened on a floor under the floor. 30 seconds and one distraction. The distraction was on the wall behind the slate. A copper bell pull rigged to the kitchen yard cock, the cook's lazy signal for the scullery boys. Cooks are lazy in every century. I reached through the rack with Tovin's wrench stub, hooked the pull, and dragged. Down the south manifold, a cock hissed open. Steam barked into the scullery, and the scullery boys started yelling like the roof was coming off. The runner's head snapped up. "Hold the line," he told the rod men, and went. The moment his back crossed the arch, I was at the pantry door, low. "Fen," I said it plain, into the line. The boy with the locked hand turned only his eyes.
Slum kid, knew not to startle. All of you, bread rack, now, quiet, floor opens. A girl at the end mouthed, who? Friend, move. They moved. 23 small bodies poured through the pantry door in the time a kettle takes to whistle. I caught the slow ones by the wrist and pushed the fast ones at the lid. A girl with brass shop green at her nails went head first into the chase, and Tovin's hands caught her below. The one with the tilted head sat down on the lip and slid. The boy who breathed wrong, I lifted under both arms and lowered like a sack of meal. The last was the skinny one. He stopped at the lid, eyes wide on the dark. Lamp below, I said, and a slate with your name going on it instead of his. Go. He went. I dropped the lid, dragged the meal sack over the seam, and was up at the rack with a heel of stale loaf in my hand when the runner came back through the arch. He stopped. He looked at the empty cloister wall. He looked at the slate. He looked at the rodmen, who looked at each other, who looked at the flagstones where 23 children had stood 30 seconds ago. His eyes came up and found me through the arch. You, he said, not a question. I bit the bread. Cook sent me for the loaf. Steam's loose in the scullery. He didn't blink. He lifted the slate off the trestle and tucked it under his arm, names and all, and started walking, slow, across the flagstones toward the pantry arch. Master Vane wants the architect by sundown, he said, to no one, to me. Alive if he comes up, numbered if he doesn't. He was 12 paces from the bread rack and closing. Listen, I didn't wait for him to take the 11th pace. I flung the bread heel underhand at the lampblack on the trestle. The slate went sideways off the edge, and I was through the larder lid and down the chase before his boot touched the pantry stone. The lid thumped shut. The meal sack settled. Above us, he could shout at flagstones all he liked. Down in the south vault, hours later, the lamps had multiplied. Tovin had lit 5 from the dead riser bleed, and someone had jammed a 6th into a niche so the table caught light all the way to its end. 36 small bodies breathed quiet in the round of it. Pell sat at the table, ink to his knuckles. A square of boxwood the size of a thumbnail rested in his left hand. The brass shop boy had carved a P into it that morning, and a stack of bread papers waited under his right, the rough sort cooks used to wrap loaves. He pressed the wood into the lampblack and stamped a corner. Name, he said, not looking up. Fenn, said the boy with the locked hand. Father's trade? Carter. Pell wrote it slow, tongue between his teeth, and pressed the stamp twice. Free paper for Fenn the carter's son. No number, no ledger above, no master, no name in any roll till the day he chooses to put it there himself. Fenn took the paper in both hands like it was hot. I stood at the foot of the ladder and watched him do the next one, and the next, the stack thinning by inches. Mira's sister came up the side passage with chalk on her cheek and a length of cord knotted at intervals along her forearm. Sem, she didn't slow. West run to where the brick changes, 83 paces, 2 side chambers, 1 hold standing water. I marked the lintels. Show me. She rolled her sleeve back. Knots every 5 paces, fingered black so she could read them in the dark, and a scrap of slate tied at her wrist where she'd scratched the lintels with a nail. Who taught you knots? Nobody. Tied them while I walked. Tovin came round the column with a cup of something hot and pushed it into my hand. Boys made tea from the larder mint, don't ask how. Mara's surveying for us, I said. The name landed before I'd meant it to. She looked up sharp. That isn't my name. It is now if you want it. I drank. Surveyor needs a name people don't already own. She thought about it a long beat, then nodded once, tight. Mara then. Pell, without looking up. Mara on the next paper. Trade, surveyor. She walked over and watched him stamp it, and her shoulders dropped a finger's width when he handed it across. The brass shop boy came up from the lower passage with chalk in his copper-green fingers and stopped at the wall behind the table. He drew a doorway. He drew a stair under it. Then he turned and faced the room, chalk hovering over the lintel. What's it called? He asked. Tovin opened his mouth, closed it. Pell, ink-mouthed, looked at me. It's not a school, Pell said. It's a place. It's a city, Fenn said. Quiet.
full weight. The brass shop boy turned back to the wall and chalked it slow over the doorway, bone-white capitals on dark brick. The Free City. Under that, smaller, more a question than a sign. Architect. He looked at me. Sem, I said. Just Sem. Founder, Tovin said, before I could swallow it back. Flat voice. He meant it. Pell tore a fresh sheet and pressed the stamp and held the paper up for the table to see. Founder, Semyon. Free City. Day 1. 36 pairs of eyes. None of them looked at the ceiling for permission. I set the cup down so my hand wouldn't show. Somewhere above us, far off through the brick, a sound started I hadn't heard in this building before. Low, slow, a pressure note climbing in the deep mains. The kind of breathing a system does when somebody upstairs lays both palms on the cistern wheels and leans. The pipe note jumped a fifth. Then it kicked. A hard hammer somewhere east, deep, ringing the brick under our feet so tea spilled down my wrist. Tovin's eyes came up. He's found the cisterns. Both wheels at once, I said, and the cup hit the table. I needed both hands free. Mara already had her sleeve back, fingering the knots on her cord, reading the West Run by feel without looking down. 2 paces lower than this floor. Then West drowns first, and I was moving before I'd finished saying it, throwing the words back at Pell. Off the floor, table, steps, anything above the knee. Now! Pell froze with the boxwood stamp pressed into the lampblack, the half-finished P of a child's free paper still wet under it. Sema! Now! Children scrambled. Fen shoved 2 smaller ones up onto the bench with his good hand. The brass shop boy snatched the chalk off the lintel and stuffed it into his shirt as if the wall itself might go under. Tovin was already halfway across the vault for the west passage, wrench out, and I scrambled to catch his elbow. Not down. The router cock at the second bracket. Close it before water finds the dry larder. That won't save the run. Nothing saves the run. Save the bread. He went. Mara stood at the mouth of the west passage, watching the floor. The first finger of water came around the corner like spilled ink. Not fast, only sure. It touched her boot and went on past. Dressed is down there. I looked at her. I sent him to mark the second lintel. He had the chalk. Her voice did not shake. Her hand on the brick did. He hasn't come back. Dressed! The pipe hammer ate my shout. I went 3 paces in, water at my ankle, 4 paces at my shin. The lamp threw my shape long down the wet brick. At the far bend, the shine where floor stopped being floor. A small voice. Sem? Walk to me. Hand on the wall. Walk. It's at my... Walk. I heard him splash. Heard a slip. Then I heard nothing at all, and the silence had weight, and the water at my knee jumped to my thigh in one long swallow that had nothing to do with what was around my feet. The far bend wasn't a bend anymore. It was a black mirror coming for me down the brick. Mara's hand closed on my collar and hauled. Sem, the door! I twisted back to the lintel, where the chalk should still have been moving. He's 3 paces! He isn't. Flat. The door. I came out backwards. Tovin met me at the west lintel with the iron slab Mara had logged, and we put our shoulders into it. The slab dropped into its groove with a sound like a tooth coming out. Water bumped the other side once, twice, and settled to a steady push against my palm. I stood with my hand on the wet iron and counted heads by the lamplight, twice over to be sure. 35. The brass shop boy was already at the drywall, chalk slow now, a single line drawn through dressed on the list under the Free City. Pell hadn't moved from the table, the stamp still in his hand. He looked at me, I shook my head, and he set the boxwood down as carefully as if it were glass. The pipe hammer eased, and the pressure note dropped a half step and held there, low and steady. He stopped leaning, Tovin said. He hasn't stopped. He's done what he wanted with the cisterns, and he's already moving to whatever wheel comes next. Above us, far up the chase, a boot scraped stone. Then a second. A hand rapped, slow, 3 times, on the underside of the larder lid. Not a sweep, not a search, an announcement. A folded paper slid through the lid crack and fell, turning, into the lamplight at my feet. My name was on it, in Vane's hand. Architect. The voice came down through the slat, conversational, almost bored.
Read it before you decide. I stooped. The paper was creamy, folded twice, sealed with a thumb-pressed dot of red. My name in the rector's slanted hand on the outside. Semyon, not the number. Tovin moved to take it. I waved him off, broke the seal with a thumbnail, and read by the nearest lamp while the iron slab still trembled against the water at my back. 6 names. Berta, the old kitchen woman who'd left the larder lid loose for me. The maintenance dwarf who'd shown me where the dead riser fed. The chapel sister. 2 older students whose only crime was eating at my table. Pell's uncle, 3rd Hall East cook. Underneath the names, 4 lines, blocked out the way Vane wrote orders for the rodmen. The bell rings at the 2nd hour. These stand on the altar plate. You come up through the north stair alone, or I light them and begin. Pell saw his uncle's name over my elbow. He sat down on the bench like someone had cut the cords behind his knees, and the boxwood stamp slipped out of his fingers and rolled, knocking a tin cup off the trestle that pinged once and went still. He's bluffing the cook, Tovin said, low. He needs his cook. He doesn't need a single one of them. He needs me. The voice through the slat again, patient, almost friendly. He says you're a tradesman, architect. A tradesman reads terms. I read them again. The hand had no shake in it. Vane had written this before the cisterns hammered, before the West Run drowned, before dressed. He'd had it folded in his pocket while he leaned on the wheels. Mara crossed to me. The surveyor's cord was still wrapped between 2 of her fingers. She did not look at the paper. How long is the 2nd hour from now? I checked the lamp wick. 1 hour and change. Time enough to go up. Time enough for him to set the rest of his board while I climb his stair. Sem, she put 1 knuckle, just 1, against the back of my hand. It's 6 lives. He wires 4,000 on day 9. You buy 6 days and 6 lives if you... I buy nothing. I walk into a room he chose. A second voice up there now, younger, eager. The South Landing runner, the one I'd left shouting at empty flagstones. He spoke like he'd been practicing. Architect, he says to tell you the bell that doesn't ring isn't yours anymore. He's hung a new clapper. He'll ring it at the 2nd hour from the altar, and your little family down there will hear it through the brick and know what you chose. Tovin's wrench came up 1 inch and stopped halfway. The brass shop boy stood at the chalk wall with a stub between his green-stained fingers, waiting to see whether to add a line under dressed or rub one out. I folded the paper along its first crease and set it on the trestle, edges square to the grain, as though it mattered which way the threat lay on the wood. 35 faces watched me. Pell, head down. Fen, his locked hand tight around a smaller girl's shoulder. Mara, the cord pinched white in her fist. The lamp at the 2nd bracket hissed and steadied. I lifted my chin to the lid. Tell him I heard the terms. A pause up there, cloth shifting on stone. Then the bored voice came back, softer now, almost kind. He says 1 more thing, architect. Come up alone, through the north stair, before the 2nd hour. Or he wires your crew in beside the 4,000 and pulls them first, name by name, slow, so you hear which one goes through the brick first. The bell will tell you when he stops asking. A red chalk arrow on the stair wall pointed up. Vane had drawn it himself. Same slant as the note in my pocket, fresh enough that the dust hadn't claimed it. Helpful host. The north stair coiled tight in the masonry, lit at every 4th step by a freshly trimmed wick. He'd sent his runners ahead to set the lamp so I wouldn't stumble, and that one courtesy told me exactly how badly he wanted me whole when I arrived. I went up. 22 steps to the first landing. The door there stood propped open with an iron wedge, the bar lifted off its keeper and laid neat against the jamb. Another arrow on the inside of the lintel. I stepped through. Behind me, the bar did not fall back into place. He wanted the road open both ways, and that was a lie I clocked and walked past anyway. 2nd flight, narrower. The mortar here was older than the school, original sanctum stone, before the patchwork, and my boots took the climb in the rhythm I'd carried up 1,000 drawing office staircases in my last life. Count, listen, read. At the top, a man in a rodcoat stood with his hands clasped behind him like a verger at a wedding, not blocking. He inclined his head as if I were expected for tea, then turned and pushed the chapel door wide.
The smell hit first, hot copper and lamp wax, and the green scorched grass stink of a wire under load. Then, the light. The ritual hall blazed, every brazier lit, every lamp trimmed, the great vault of it stripped of pews and lined wall to wall with iron cradles. Children in each cradle. The small ones at the front, the half-grown ones toward the back. Each one had a copper band around the throat, and a copper band around each wrist, and a thin braided lead ran from every band down into a brass trough that snaked between the rows and pooled toward the altar at the far end of the hall. I had drawn this kind of array once, in a different life, for a different king. I had drawn it knowing it would never be built. It was built. A small boy in the nearest cradle saw me come in and tried to lift his head. The copper at his throat brought it back down, gentle. He was awake. They all were. Every face turned toward the door, and not one of them made a sound, because whatever was in the trough kept them quiet without putting them under. And that was a craft I had never taught anyone. On the altar plate, 6 bodies, Berta on her side, hands tied behind. The dwarf, his beard wet. The chapel sister. The 2 older students from my table. Pell's uncle the cook, eyes open, looking straight at the doorway like he'd been told to. Not Mara. They hadn't taken Mara, hadn't known where to find her in the chase below. And that small mercy I bit down before it could slow my feet. Past the altar, 20 paces beyond the last cradle, stood Vane. He had taken off his stole. His sleeves were rolled to the elbow. His right hand rested on a brass lever set into a stone box the size of a coffin, and his left hand held a pocket watch open on its chain, the lid bright against his palm. Between him and me, set squarely across the central aisle, stood a door I had not drawn. Black iron, hammered flush into a frame built around it after the rest of the room. The kind of door I had specified myself in another life for rooms no one was ever meant to leave. He smiled when he saw me. "On the mark, architect." He thumbed the watch lid closed, and I heard the click of it from across the hall. "The second hour is in 9 minutes." He tapped the brass lever with one finger. Once. Like a man testing a bell. "The door's yours. Come through it before the clapper falls. Or I pull this from where I stand and you watch the lot of them light from the wrong side of the iron." Behind me, very softly, the chapel door eased shut. The wedge had been kicked away. 8 minutes now. Vane's thumb rolled across the brass lever head, slow, the metal squeaking once under his nail. 8 minutes, he called across the cradles. "Or 7.5 by the time you finished admiring it. Walk, architect." I took a step. The iron door grew. It was a fist-thick slab, hammered flush, 4 hidden hinges sunk into the frame, no handle on this side, because a door like that wasn't meant to be opened from here. I knew the type. I had specified the type. In another life, I had drawn one exactly like this for a holding room 3 floors beneath a granary, and the man who had walked into that holding room on my own orders had been me. After the king I served found a use for me he had not bothered to mention. My second step did not happen. My boot came up and stopped a finger off the flagstone. The hinge of the knee would not close. Somewhere behind my teeth, a sound tried to begin and got nowhere. Not a word, not a breath, a thin nothing that left my mouth dry as chalk. Berta turned her head on the altar plate. She saw my face. Her eyes went wide in a way I did not want to see on her. Architect. That was Pell's uncle the cook, voice low and even, the way a man speaks to a horse at the edge of a bridge. "Go on, lad. You can do it. You always could." The dwarf shifted his bound wrists and grunted his agreement into the wood. The chapel sister moved her lips around what might have been a prayer or might have been my name. Even the 2 older students from my table, the same boys who had watched me prise the cellar grate off its rust last winter, were looking at the iron the way you look at a wall a friend is about to walk through, because they had seen me do that kind of thing once and expected nothing else of me now. Vane laughed. It was a small, private laugh, like a man enjoying his own joke alone in a kitchen. "Look at them," he said. "Look, even your cook believes in you. Go on then, put your shoulder to it. That's what an architect does, isn't it? Find the load and break it." He tapped the lever again, one finger, almost fond. "I'd quite like to see it.
I built the frame around the door after the door went in. Took 11 men. But you, on a good night, with the right run-up, who knows? My boot still hung in the air. I willed it forward. It came down precisely where it had started. The iron in front of me had a small bead of condensation running along its lower edge, very slowly, gathering at the corner before it dropped. And I watched that bead because I could not make myself look up at the seam where the metal met the stone, because the last time I had looked at a seam like that, the seam had been on the inside, and I could still count the bolts going home. 6 minutes and 40, Vane said pleasantly. Berta's mouth opened. Sem, she whispered. The name no one in this hall was supposed to know. Please. My hand would not close into a fist. Behind the iron, very faintly, I heard the pocket watch tick across the hall, and then the small boy in the nearest cradle, the one who had tried to lift his head when I came in, made the first sound any of them had made since the door shut behind me. The boy's sound was small, half cough, half question, and it landed in the middle of the hall like a coin dropped on stone. I had been trying to walk through a door. That was the mistake. That was why my boot wouldn't come down. A door like this was never meant to be walked through from the wrong side, and every cell in me that had ever drawn one knew it cold. You don't break a door like that. You don't shoulder it. You find what it's part of and cheat the whole of it. I let my boot down where it had started. The flagstone took it. I lifted my eyes off the bead of condensation, off the seam I couldn't bear to follow up the iron, and put them on the room instead, and read. The trough first, brass, 4 fingers wide, running the aisle from the foot of every cradle to the altar plate, copper leads sunk in the lip at each station. The seams were soldered tight at every joint but one, the third from the altar, where someone had run out of tin and used a wax and resin plug because the array couldn't wait. I'd seen plugs like that on my own drawings, marked temporary. Temporary meant a man would die before he came back to fix it. The altar next. 6 bodies, 6 bindings. Berta's wrist rope passed under the plate and tied off at a ring in the floor that wasn't load-bearing. The dwarf's ankle loop ran to the same wrong ring. Whoever bound them had used the closest iron, not the right one. The door last. Black iron, hinged inside, no handle this side, and a frame built around it after the fact. 11 men, Vane had said. 11 men meant the frame wasn't part of the array. The door was a stage prop. The lever was the play. 5.5, Vane sang from the box. Architect, you're sightseeing. I didn't answer him. I crouched. The flagstone under my boot had a chalk line running off its edge. Faint, the kind of guide mark a mason leaves himself and forgets to wash away. I followed it. It ran under the nearest cradle, joined a second mark, and the two met the third at the trough exactly where the wax and resin plug sat. I almost laughed. Whoever built this had drawn it the way I would have, because of course they had. I'd drawn it in another life, knowing it would never be built. Architect! Vane's voice had changed pitch. On your feet! In a minute. You don't have a minute. Then in less. I reached into the cradle. The boy turned his head toward my hand without another sound. Banded throat, banded wrists, eyes too bright for a face that small. I didn't touch the band. I touched the copper lead where it left his wrist cuff and ran to the trough, followed it with 2 fingers to the joint, and pinched the small brass tap no one was supposed to notice because no one was supposed to come at this thing from inside the hall. A service tap. I'd drawn it years ago, another life, for draining the line in case a child fouled the flow mid-right and the array had to be flushed before it sickened the rest. I turned it a quarter. The copper hummed under my fingers. Not loud, a thrum like a wire in wind, and the bead of condensation on the iron door, the one I'd been watching slide down, slid up the metal instead. Up. Vane saw it. I heard his watch lid snap open across the hall, the brass click carrying farther than a man's voice should. What did you do? Not a question. A flat sound, the kind a man makes when a door he'd locked opens itself behind him. I stood. I left the tap a quarter open and put my hand on the next cradle along, and the next, walking the aisle the way I should have walked it from the first heartbeat, not toward his door, along his trough. Architect. Sharper. Stop. You told me to find the load and break it. My fingers found the second tap on the second cradle.
the third on the third, and I didn't look up at him while I did it. I'm not going to break it. I'm going to read it back to you. Stop! I turned the second tap. The hum doubled. Berta's eyes were on me, and the cook's, and the two boys from my table had the look of men who just remembered they were right about something. Vane's hand left the watch and went to the lever, and the watch fell to the end of its chain and bumped his hip. Pull it, I said over my shoulder, and I didn't slow, and I didn't let my hand leave the copper. Pull it now, I'll thank you for it. His fingers closed around the brass and stopped there because the lever under his palm had begun very faintly to grow warm. At the third joint, the plug coughed once and gave a wet hiss. The wax resin seal lifted half a thumb and began to weep brown sludge onto the flagstone. I kept walking. Fourth tap, fifth. My thumb and finger turned each brass head a quarter, then waited for the hum to settle, then moved. Stop that! Vane's voice had a crack in it now, halfway between a man and a boy who had just felt the floor go. Sem, stop! He used my name. That was new. I didn't stop, and the sixth tap took 2 tries because the brass was sweating, and when it gave the hum from the trough dropped a full tone and steadied there, low and patient, the sound a thing makes when it has finally been told the truth. The plug let go. Not a burst, a sag. The wax peeled back from the brass lip in one slow flap, and the line vented down through the joint into the foundation stone underneath, copper-bright fluid sheeting between 2 flagstones and disappearing into the throat of the chapel's old drain. Berta saw it. Her bound hand twitched against the floor ring. That's the flush, I told her, not looking up. That's where it was meant to go if the array fouled. It's fouled. It is not fouled. Vane, very fast. Architect, you've opened the service line wide. It'll all run to the cellar. I know where it'll run. You'll waste them. That word stopped me a half step. I put my palm flat on the 7th cradle. The boy inside had his eyes closed. His throat band went slack as the copper lead cooled under my fingers, and the small light at the back of his cuff, a pinprick of yellow I had drawn into the cradle a life ago so a tender could see at a glance who was still feeding the line, winked out. Down the row, the next pinprick winked out, then the next. Pull the lever, Vane. I straightened. You wanted me through the door. I'm not going through the door. Pull it. His knuckles were white around the brass. The lever head had an orange under the polish, an underlight that did not belong to brass. He didn't pull. He couldn't pull. It's drawing back, he said, quiet, almost curious. It's drawing back through your stage prop, yes. The iron door behind him let out a low ringing, a bell tone with no strike behind it. The condensation on its face was running upward in fat, clear rivers and gathering along the lintel in a long, bright seam. Sem, Berta's voice was small. The children. I know. I walked the last 3 cradles in 6 steps and turned the last 3 taps without slowing, and the hum in the trough went from low to lower until it was no sound at all, only a feeling in the soles of my boots, dead and steady. The clapper began to move. I heard the rope above the box creak, the heavy iron tongue starting its long fall toward the bell rim. 2nd hour. The hour Vane had set himself for the lighting of 4,000 small windows from the wrong side. Vane pulled. He had to. He had spent a year building toward a man who would pull at the 2nd hour, and he was not going to be a man who couldn't, even now. He set his shoulder under it and dragged the lever down through its arc, and the brass gave him a noise like fat in a pan, and a smell came off it I will not put on you because you do not want to carry it. Nothing happened to the cradles. The pinprick lights stayed out. Something happened to Vane. The lever went the last inch on its own, snapping forward under its own weight, as if the array had been waiting all this time for permission. The orange under the brass jumped up the rod and into the coffin box, and threw a brief, ugly light across the seam of the iron door. Inside the box, a man made a sound. Not a word, a short, surprised intake. The noise of a thing built, turning, and looking at its builder.
The clapper struck. The bell tolled the second hour, plain and clean, and in the chapel below me 4,000 small wicked lights did not light, and 6 bound hostages on a floor breathed at the same time. And the boy in the nearest cradle opened his eyes and looked at me, and his throat worked, and he made a small, wet sound that was his and only his. From the box, no second sound. I stood in the aisle with my hand on the last copper lead, listening for Vane, not hearing him, and I could not yet make myself walk down to the box and see what the array had done to the man who had drawn the lever. The bell's last shutter bled out of the rafters and left the chapel ringing with no sound at all. Down the long row, the cradles ticked as their iron cooled. A soft brass click here, a copper sigh there, the way a stove talks itself down after the fire goes out. Then, a second sound. The boy in the nearest cradle made his small wet noise again, and 2 cradles down, a girl answered him. Thin, a question shaped like a name I didn't know. "Berta," I said, "I'm here." "Tell me they're waking themselves." A pause while she lifted her head against the rope. "The one by my knee just opened his eyes. He looked at me, architect. He looked at me like a boy." I let go of the copper lead. It was harder than it should have been. My hand had been gripping the lead the whole time, and I'd lost track of which one of us was holding the other up. The lead clinked once against the cradle rim and swung loose, cold, dead, mine. I walked down the aisle to the iron door. It was still there, that fist-thick black slab Vane had set across the chancel, but the condensation on its face had stopped running upward and was only water now, beating and sliding down in plain, stupid drops. No handle on this side. I'd drawn it that way myself, a life ago, and meant it. I put my palm flat against the iron and waited for it to bite. It didn't bite. It was cold the way a doorknob in winter is cold, and that was all it was. Behind it, on Vane's side, I could hear the coffin box ticking like the cradles ticked, brass coming down off its heat, and under the ticking, nothing, no breathing. Whatever had made that one surprised intake had not made anything since. "Sem," Berta again, softer. "The hinge pin." Berta had eyes when mine were full of door. The hinge pin on this side was a long brass dowel the length of my forearm, knurled at the top, painted the same dead black as the iron so you wouldn't see it unless you knew to look. And I had been looking at the door as a stage prop and missed it. I worked the pin up out of its sleeve with both hands. It came in 3 short hauls and a long one, and the door sagged on its remaining hinge with a sound like a man giving in. Then I put my shoulder to the slab and levered it wide. Cold air came through from the box, cold and brass, and something underneath I am not going to put on you. I did not look at the box. I looked past it, through the high lancet window the chapel sister had left unblinded, out and down, and the city was there. My city. The one I'd been told to stop calling mine. The lamps along the lower wall were lit. The lamps up the merchant stair were lit. Some fool had a bonfire going in the fish market square and was feeding it with crates, sending sparks up into the cold black, and a bell answered ours from St. Olen's, late and sloppy, and another from the river quay later and sloppier still. All of them lit by their own hands tonight. I breathed. It came in long and went out longer. The second was steadier. The third stopped trying to be anything in particular and just moved through me the way air moves through a room with both doors open. Behind me, the boy in the nearest cradle said a word. I didn't catch it. Berta laughed once, a wet, startled bark, and said, "He wants down, architect. He wants down." "In a minute," I said, and did not turn. I stood in the open doorway, cold city air on one side of me, warm tick of cooling brass on the other. I let the bell finish dying out in the rafters, and I let the death door be a door. Then I went back inside to cut the rope on the floor ring.